Alpha, over.
Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the Anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
Welcome to the Omega Particle Podcast. Like the man said, I am your Anchorman of the Federation, Jonathan Wiegand, sitting behind the beautiful golden OPP microphone, ready to embark even more on our DS9 176 plus episode review, and a journey of 1,000 steps starts with a single one. And today we're on episode 2, titled is Past Prologue. We get to see a little bit of the backstory, some of Kierra's past, kind of like what did terrorists do during the occupation of Bajor. Interesting stuff. But just a reminder before we get into that, this is, again, going to be a weekly review in addition to what we have to do with our other, great Trek content as well. But I wanted to add a little bit more spice to these episodes, and I thought it'd be really fun to do counters and trackers throughout the whole series, so we can get at the very end and say, well, they did this 8 times, and they did Julian hit on Dax 437 times. So I was like, okay, we're going to have to do that. And we're just going to have to count up all the ridiculous stuff that happens very frequently. So, for example, we're currently tracking number 1, like I mentioned before, Julian hitting on Dax. We're at 2 times on that. The weird, uncomfortable situations between Garak and Julian, again, that's at 1 time. This episode is the first time we saw Garak, so we're bringing him in at 1. And then something that I've always noticed, and I'm very curious, is Kierra's hair changes. So currently we're at 2. And before we get into the episode, really fun fact here is that the reason they changed it from episode 1 to episode 2 is because that came at the request of Nana Vister, because she didn't think, Kierra would be the person that would style their hair every day and sit in front of the mirror and do that. So they just kind of gave her that, I guess, I don't know, it's not a buzz cut, but it's a very short hairstyle. So that's why it abruptly changed. Anyway, we just wanted to start out and thank everybody and remind everyone for listening and reviewing and the Patrick Stewart memoir, episode 2. Thank you so much. We do have our 100th episode celebration coming out, and we have a very special guest. She's been on the podcast before, and she'll be coming back, so we're excited to do that. I think we might do another drinking Trek review, maybe. I don't know. So that's going to be for the 100th episode. I'm very excited about that. Wherever you're streaming at, whether it's a Datapad, Holo Novel, wherever at, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. It helps the podcast out tremendously. So without further ado, Luna, let's roll. I'm sure if you're a fan of DS9 and have been a fan of DS9 for several years, you'll always hear, people say it only gets good after season 3. And I definitely think there's some kernel of truth to that in a general sense. I will say that I really forgot how some of these early episodes are actually really good and actually really entertaining. And what DS9 does better than any other Star Trek show is that it starts off with just incredibly well fleshed out characters, and they always have a ton of personality right from day one. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say the possible only exception would, in my opinion, might be Jadzia. And I believe the writers, the writers, right? Luna, the intern, everybody. The writers actually acknowledged that they didn't know what to do with her. They just have this beautiful lady on set, and she's a trill, and it's so they're like, they kind of didn't know what to do with her. But for this particular episode, Past Prologue, it continues the strong start that the Emissary Part 1 and Part 2 began. And it's kind of passed the baton, and there's going to be some goofy episodes ahead. So just be prepared for that. I'm excited. Is it Alan Moraine? I know that's coming. So there's going to be some fun episodes in the front ahead. But you know what? Let's not forget that these aren't too terrible either. And I would say the most memorable part of this episode is the introduction of probably one of the most interesting, jaded, confusing characters in Elam Garak. We're going to get more into that soon in the episode, but we see him finally make an appearance, and it kind of really steals the show. Overall, this episode, just a reminder, if you haven't watched it in some time, we have a Bajoran terrorist cell called the Khon Ma, and they are still kind of attacking the Cardassians after the withdrawal from Bajor, and they're kind of been doing these quote-unquote unspeakable crimes against the Cardassian people. We have this old contact from Kierra's past, comes back to DS9. He's on the run. He comes into DS9 looking for asylum, and then he ends up kind of working with the Duras sisters to prep a bomb to blow up the wormhole. And he's saying it's for non-violent, and he just wants to get the Federation and everybody off of Bajor's back. But we'll get into more of that later. That is the overall kind of synopsis of the episode. I have some stray observations. So, speaking of Dax, she kind of just barely exists here. And what's troubling in terms of her character was that I didn't realize how little she was a part of everything until it kind of popped up halfway through the episode. I know she eventually gets more fleshed out, but at the beginning, it just kind of takes me back a little bit. And I will say the best line of the episode is by far is Sisko saying to Kierra, "If you go above my head again, I'll have yours on a silver plate." And that is Benjamin Sisko in a nutshell. Shows the human side of Sisko and the real world. This is not some heavenly Picard of season 1 of TNG. This dude is busting balls, busting ovaries, and getting shit done. Okay? Am I drinking? Maybe, but let's not get into that. He's just doing. It's not even about the doing it, man. He's just getting the job done, and it's kind of finally nice to see that. It's a real sci-fi, real person response. Because I've had people go above my head before, and for erroneous reasons, not at my current job, but like prior places, and it just really makes me mad. So either way, moving on, another kind of great moment is the effing awkward Garak Bashir thing, because he goes behind him and he puts his hands on his shoulders, and the whole time I'm like, this is really, because they came out and said, yeah, we know Garak is gay. And so I think I haven't done a rewatch since that announcement's been made. So I've been I was like, all right, I'm going to kind of go back and watch and see if this is true. And there's some pretty freaking strong evidence from the very beginning. I was like, yeah, I can see it now. And it's another funny thing, stray observation, is Kierra mentions, they need to bring back these splinter groups to Bajor. If Bajor is going to succeed, we need to get everyone back home. And I'm like, how many freaking groups are there? And they don't really ever bring it up again. It's just, it just seems like there's tens and tens of thousands. I was like, are there? Or is it just kind of bumped up for this episode, kind of making it seem more of a big deal? But still, if these people are committing acts of war after the war, they're war criminals. Speaking of war crimes, let's talk about this plot hole here in the script. So I love the logic of blowing up the wormhole by Tano to get rid of the Federation. So Tanolos, yeah, it sounds like a Spanish beach town. He wants to get rid of the Federation. He wants to do it in a non-violent way, so he wants to blow up the wormhole. But the Federation were on DS9 and orbiting Bajor before the wormhole was even discovered. So it really wouldn't matter if he destroys the wormhole or not, because the Federation's not going anywhere. So that's just, and plus, the Bajorans believe their gods, the prophets, are in the wormhole. So he would be destroying their gods. What the F, dude? So I don't really understand that at all. I think it's, I don't know. I mean, the writing is normally very good, but this one was pretty sucky to me. We kind of see the foundation in this episode, and this is a little Easter egg for future episodes in season 2 and season 3 about that nationalist Bajoran kind of movement that comes on. You know, they, in the future seasons, they come and they spray paint the symbols and they're like, yeah, Bajorans for Bajorans and all Bajorans and only Bajorans type of thing. And and this is kind of the foundation. We kind of see that from Tanalos be like, when he exuberantly says Bajorans for Bajorans. Also, to the last stray observation before we get into, more formalized review of the episode is when Tanalos is debating Kierra, it's just like he's constantly be like, you've changed, man. I'm like, dude, it's been like 2 freaking weeks. She's like, you've been working with the Federation, been getting in their bed, and you're just not the same, man. Like, you've changed, bro. I'm like, it's only been like, what, a month, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Like, she was literally out. She says that in the first episode, an emissary. She was like, I was literally fighting, and then now I'm, boom, here on the station. So I was very confused by that. But I definitely like the take was he was trying to manipulate her and be like, hey, you used to be cool. You should like try to blow up this religious wormhole. Like, that'd be cool. I'm not a big drinker. So just a little about me. I was in Raleigh the past couple days. So I don't normally drink a lot, but I had a few old fashions, and now I'm drinking now. So hopefully we can keep it together through this review. And speaking of review, let's actually advance a little bit to our review here. Why I think past Prologue works so well is that we can see this coming from the moment Kierra was introduced in Emissary. Kierra is this passionate, devoted to her people, freedom fighter, and she's fighting back against these oppressors, and now she's taking on this role in this kind of flailing Bajoran government, and she's working to help build the bridge between Bajor and the Federation, and she obviously has mixed feelings about this, and I think it's something that we'll see a lot in the next season or two, is this, they fought so hard to get their freedom and to secure Bajor's independence that now all of a sudden they're bringing in the Federation, and you're kind of like, well, what the F, bro? Like, why are we bringing in another massive entity to kind of oversee us and help us? And again, you could say the Cardassians were like, hey, we're helping you too. We're just putting you in labor camps. And again, I guess the Cardassians are from Brooklyn, but so I understand. The logic makes sense. And I think that's what good writing does, is that you can say, oh, I understand everyone's point of view in this. We know what the Federation is and their experiences throughout, all of Star Trek. So we can definitely be like, no, these are the good guys. They're going to come help, but, Bajor, not so much. They don't know. And we have the Cardassians still doing Cardi things, not Cardi B, but still doing Cardi things, lurking in the margins, ready to take advantage of even the slightest show of weakness from Bajor or the Federation. So you have this kind of Cold War-ian type of feel throughout the first couple episodes, and Kierra is a bit suspicious of Sisko from the very beginning, and kind of resentful of the fact that I have to take orders from this guy who wasn't in the trenches with me, wasn't around, eating rations and starving to death, and kind of doing all these crazy escapades against the Cardassians. So now this guy just comes in, and now he's in charge. So I understand the resentment there and the questioning of his leadership. But that also means we see in Prologue that, people from Kierra's old life are going to occasionally show up in the show, people with their own agenda, people who aren't on board with being friendly with outsiders, friendly with the Federation, and it calls Kierra's loyalty into questions, 100%. And this whole episode is about divided loyalty and that delicate balance I guess you could even say it's a high wire act, it's kind of just going back and forth. And we've seen this specifically with the Bajorans. Back on Next Generation, we saw Ro Lauren, played by the great Michelle Forbes. She faced a similar crisis that Kierra has in Post and Preemptive Strike. But there, Ro was, sort of a special guest star, and she appeared in a handful of episodes, but so she was recognizable to the audience, but her choices on the show weren't defined by need to keep her in the same space, so to speak, as, the rest of the ensemble. So this meant when Ro was asked to spy on a group of freedom fighters, she found that they were good people and their goals were kind of the same as hers. And it also meant that when push comes to shove, when Ro sided with those freedom fighters, she abandoned Starfleet and, engineered that rare disappointment in Picard from her mentor. And then we saw it come full circle again in Picard Season 3. But this was all regular because Ro wasn't a, lack of a better term, regular on the show. TNG was coming to the end of its 7th season, and this was one of the last few episodes of Season 7, so why the hell not? Let's just run with it. However, now Kira's a regular, and theoretically, the show could pull a fast one on us and ditch her in the early going, but to me, that wouldn't really work. We're too close to the start of a big series to kind of sucker punch us into that effect, and even Edgy Trek isn't big on rug pulling ever. Now, I can't talk about the newer stuff, but the golden age of Star Trek, not so much. So to me, when I first watched this episode, Kira's facing someone from her past. She has to make a difficult decision, decide where her loyalties lies. I knew by the end it was going to be who she was going to take to the prom. We know she was going to stick with Sisko and the Federation. Even though, Tana Los had these great, long, high-minded lectures. They did, I will say this, they did make a good job with Tana, should I say, not Tano, is because, if you make him too corrupt, the whole storyline just gets absurd. And then it's tempting to make him a flat-out, butthole. But in doing so, Kira would be let off the hook. It was like, yeah, this guy's a complete butthole. And the rest of the guys are good, like, moral Boy Scouts in comparison. So you kind of have to have this guy look like an idealistic warrior who's had to turn to crime and frustrated he never got recognized as the hero by the current government. And he's like, well, I'm going to get my fair share and try to get the immense wealth with the rival. I mean, they could have gone that way, but I don't know. I think we kind of get something close to that, but not exactly that. Tana is still fighting the good fight, but he arrives at DS9 saying, hey, I'm completely done. I just want to live my life on Bajor and be done. And we kind of don't get that. He kind of just immediately turns on Kira, and we kind of see, especially when the Klingons show up, which we'll get into. It's one of my dislikes of the episode. It just kind of felt, okay, run of the mill at that point. I will say this, one big part that surprised me was how quickly Sisko granted asylum. I expected much of this episode to focus on Kira and Sisko going back and forth on how to best deal with Tana's past crimes. And, Sisko was not really there at all, so it's kind of difficult for him, and he has to be more understanding from Kira's. But the fact that Sisko was like, yep, asylum, got him, bingo, bango, no problem. I think that was kind of surprising to me, but it's okay. I mean, that was before Tana's true colors were revealed, and it wouldn't be very smart for a Starfleet officer trying to establish diplomatic relations with a foreign body to hand over one of the entities like citizens to their sworn enemies for whatever crimes he did or didn't do. So it's like, yeah, it's politically it's a smart move too. Yeah, so that's one thing that did surprise me. Now, getting into the likes of the episode, there's a lot to like here. I appreciate that Kira's decision is made without a lot of hand-wringing and going back and forth. Like, sure, she's upset and none too happy about what she has to do, but as soon as she's figured out that Tana's knew that she'd be on the station, been planning on exploiting her all along, she's like, boom, I can't go with you, bro. And kind of like what I said a couple minutes ago, like, we knew, there's not going to be any rug pulling here. We knew what was going to happen at the end, but it's also nice that she doesn't immediately go to Cisco with this information. Instead, she pays a visit to Odo for moral advice. And this is one of the first times we see them establish their friendship and reinforces the idea that, Odo is this straight shooter type of guy, and they're going to have this beautiful friendship professionally and personally that they can build upon and be fleshed out in future seasons. So this was the first time we got to see that. It was good. I love that she went to him, but I guess going back to Tana bombing the wormhole is that I understand okay, he's moral. I would say he's moral in that way. It's, his goals in my mind aren't really helping what's best for Bajor in the long run. I think he's very a single-minded individual, which means he can accomplish amazing things. It just means he's worse than useless in a society which needs to compromise to survive. And he does not want to compromise at all. So he's a very complex guy, and I really liked, kind of reinforcing what I said a couple minutes ago, I liked how they played him. They didn't play him a complete butthole 100%, but they didn't play him a righteous, idealistic warrior either. So a good balancing act. And for dislikes and for failings on the episode, I know Garak is great, but Bashir kind of seems like a twerp throughout most of his scenes. Garak basically has to literally spell it out to him like he's a moron. He's like, hey, you need to come to my shop at 11:30. He's like, well, I don't need a suit. He's like, no, come to my shop at 11:30. I don't mind if the good doctor isn't up on his espionage tactics yet, but there's no need to make him an idiot. And I know it's almost like he's overtly childish, and kind of like that vibe. And if he's supposed to be the top of his, second of his class, and one of the best young doctors in the fleet who had his pick to go anywhere, why treat him that way? Why make him... So it's kind of hard to be okay, he's a serious medical genius, but he's also a child. So it's kind of tough to see that. And another of my dislikes is using the Duras sisters as Tana's Klingon contacts. I think it's a silly way to remind us that DS9 is connected to TNG, and the characters, they're okay and they serve the purpose for the narrative, but a new Klingon would have just done the job just as well. And I was reading one review and it was the guy said he got a weird feeling because it just only feels like there's only 20 Klingons in the whole world, in the universe, because we just keep seeing the same over and over and over again. So yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we can expand on it. And I will say they definitely do going forward. To kind of wrap up this episode as we end it, I would give this an episode a solid 3.8 out of 5, simply because it does set the table to give us a little more and give us some great character moments and fleshing out and laying foundations that we'll see pay off in future seasons, like the Odo-Kierra relationship, the Kierra-Cisco relationship, the Bajoran Federation relationship. But I'd like this episode to be a little bit more focused on other items and not doing another foundation laying. We just had 2 hours of that in Emissary. Now we have almost another 30 minutes of this episode doing that. However, I will say 3.8 out of 5 is still a great and above average score. I'm going to be very hard scoring this series. So 5s are going to be impossible. 4.5s are going to be rare. 4s are going to be just a good episode, enjoyed episode. So 3.8 is right there. It's not bad. It's not bad. I'm not going to go through and be like, everything was 5. It was great, huge, great, known better. No, I'm not going to do that because that's a waste of your time and my time. And we have the brightest, best audience in the quadrant. So I'm going to get you guys one better than that. And again, kind of like my stray thoughts at the beginning of this episode was there's some inconsistencies and a little bit of plot holes that took me out of it. So that's why the 3.8. But Luna, that has been our review of past Prologue, Season 1, Episode 2 of Deep Space Nine. So Luna, let's wrap it up. thank you all so much for listening. And just a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening, whatever computer, desktop, HoloPad, phone. We would greatly appreciate it. And we'll thank you so much for that. I think we're about to hit 27,000 followers on Instagram, and we're at the top 50, top 60 on Apple Podcasts for TV reviews. So thank you so much for that. So I definitely appreciate all the love and support, you guys. And again, feel free to reach out. I love connecting with you guys. It's always so much fun, and getting to hear from everybody. And again, if you're looking for some good stuff, if you're kind of late Friday night, you're in a show hole, you don't know what to do. You're kind of looking around and being like, I wish somebody would give me a great recommendation on a show to watch. Well, look no further than jasontalksmovies.wordpress.com. Yes, Luna, that is jasontalksmovies.wordpress.com. It is, if I could say, that is the best piece of movie and TV, non-Trek movie and TV blog out there, I would say it. It is the cat's meow. Is that a saying? Are we going to edit? We'll probably edit that out. So it is absolutely great. Please check it out. Great friend of the podcast. So please remember to go, really appreciate it, and read his stuff. And also we're in November 9th, 10th, whenever this episode is going to come out. And it is Mental Health Month for men. But why include men? Let's give it for everybody. So I know we have seasonal depression coming in. So just remember, you guys are valued. You're loved. We need you here. Please feel free to reach out to those people in your life. They care about you, and we need you here, guys. So remember, keep those crowns on straight, kings and queens. And Luna, second star to the right. Straight on till morning.